Well, I'm going to start us off, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to One Breath Rising Second Sunday Series. Today, we are blessed to have as our feature Lauren K. Alleyne, and she is the author of two collections of poetry, Difficult Fruit and Honeyfish, two chapbooks, Dawn in the Kaatskills and Unbecoming Gretel, excuse me, as well as co-editor of Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry 2020. She is also the director of the Furious Flower Poetry um, organization at James Madison University. Okay. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, The Atlantic, Miss Muse, Tin House, and The Caribbean Writer, among others. Her most recent honors include nomination for the 2020 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Poetry, the longlist for the 2020 Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, and the shortlist for the 2020 Library of Virginia Literary Awards. Her poetry was selected for the 2021 Best American Poetry Anthology, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day for 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022, and was a finalist for the 2019 Best of the Net. She was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and she earned a BA in English from Francis College in Brooklyn, St. Francis's College in Brooklyn, and an MA in English and Creative Writing from Iowa State University, and an MFA in Poetry from Cornell University. In 2022, Alleyne was recognized by the State Council of Higher Education for the state of Virginia with a 2022 Outstanding Faculty Award for her work at James Madison University, where she currently serves as a professor of English and executive director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center. And I want to welcome Lauren, to our reading series here
Thank
today.
You.
And
thank you so much.
We so appreciate you coming out, and we know how things get, the times change, everything is, life is life. But we are so glad to have you here today. So please welcome Lauren K. Alleyne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's just a lot to be here, to be, I've been executive director for almost 3 years at Fierce Flower. It's a wonderful calling and mission, but I just love the opportunity to come be a poet in some spaces. So thank you, EJ, for the invitation, for thinking of me. And, I'm happy to share some work with you all. I'm feeling like I just want to do newish stuff, and maybe not just, but certainly I think I wanted to start with this poem, which it's not inspiringly called Writer's Block. What poetry to write this bloody morning, with its snipers and handcuffed students, with its foreign dead, with its hungry cancer eating your friends' bones, with the bones of children unearthed from a Palestinian mass grave, with the planet's rising human-fed fever, with your mother's voice crackling with pain across the long-distance call, with the masses in you feeding themselves on your stocked-up griefs, with the words squeezed into silences so dense they crush you, alphabet, throat, and song. So that's what writing's been feeling like a little bit these days. But I am going to actually head back to an older poem and maybe give you all some context. So for the last very, very many years, I've been writing in the persona of the Grimm's brothers' Hansel and Gretel. I am fascinated with fairy tales in general, but ever since my friend and I, who were roommates and BFFs together in grad school, kind of, we're talking about our love of fairy tales. We sort of fixated on Hansel and Gretel as one Disney hasn't ruined yet. Two, it has no wedding, which is why Disney hasn't tackled it, right? It's this young girl who in our imagination sort of saves herself, but has to do so, I mean, with tremendous cost. Again, even in the way we retell the tale, when I usually do that, people are like, oh, I'm like, they get kicked out from home, not once, but twice. The first adult they find tries to eat them, and to save herself, she has to commit murder, right? And then she goes back home, and the home she's left is like, oh, we missed you, we loved you, and you have treasure now, welcome back, right? It's kind of messed up. And the question for me has been, what are we supposed to learn from this exactly? What's the tale? But it over these very many years, it's evolved. I've done poems in which I retell the tale from different points of view and angles and considerations. But really, I've been interested in thinking of the story as a lens to think about our current world, right? And what's happening in it. And Gretel, it turns out, has a lot to say. So always Gretel has the same history of the story, but she appears in various timescapes. I'm going to read this one that was published in Muse back in 2016. Gretel Advises America. The story is old. There is safety, then danger, then the illusory ending. There is a person who believes everyone is for the taking, who will make food of you and assume you will comply with no resistance. This is always the mistake. The trick is old. There is no great again, no return to what was for anyone, not the father longing for an unburdened life, not the mother, the stepmother clambering toward the dream of ever after she'd polished beneath her lids for a lifetime, not for the children who must grow away from innocence one way or another. The moral is this: you already know the spells for survival, your mind's swift magic, the miracle of your hands, love, and all its attendant fire. So that's Gretel. I think still relevant in 2025. So I'm looking for another one where she so again, like I said, I've sort of played around with timescapes, but also where. So I've been thinking about what are the ways that this tale still sort of enacts in our time. And it occurred to me that the witch, one might say, was simply standing her ground. And so this poem is, again, from both the witch's tale and Gretel's point of view, right? What do we even mean with that stand your ground? So this is Stand Your Ground 1, The Crone's Case. And this is actually a hustle. They came with teeth and busy hands for what was mine, built with my own hands. Here in the forest, you are predator or prey. The choice lies heavy like stones in your hand. I named this hovel my country, this forest a war I would win at any cost. I would hand over nothing, take as tribute whatever dared cross my borders. I made weapons of my hands. Those two tiny terrorists were my rightful spoils. They made their fate the decision of my hands. Evil, witch, those are not my names. I feared only for my safety, wrested it back from their hands. 2, Gretel defends. Bile coated our tongues, our stomachs empty of any sustenance. We pounced, hungry and so heartsick for home. We were greedy with longing, reached for what sweetly beckoned us. The house smelled insistently like welcome, drew us like memory. The pleasure was so brief, illusory. How foolish to have believed candy and kindness to be synonymous. Surely we should have learned by now how cruelty can look human, wear the face even of family. We are children, or were, before we learned the lie of safety. So that's Stand Your Ground, Gretel, and the witch chiming in to give her defense. Another space that I really felt that Hansel and Gretel lens useful was thinking about the border crisis, the question of what makes a parent send their children into an unknown space where they cannot protect them. And one answer might be because they hope that on the other side there is something better for them. And if you haven't read it, actually there's a novel called The True Story of Hansel and Gretel that situates the story in World War II Germany, where Hansel and Gretel are Jewish children who can pass, and they are sent off into the forest by their parents as a way to escape. Right. And so again, with, I've been reading all the Hansels and Gretels I could find, but that border, again, especially the image of children in cages, really sparked a connection with this tale. Gretel unaccompanied. At the border, they gave us foil blankets, rations of water and nuts. The guards screamed at us in a language we could barely understand. We sniffled into our elbows, yearning for our parents, their faces, their too tight embraces, their voices wrapped around our names. No llores, they said. Don't you want to live in America? ¿Por qué no quiere la libertad? No llores, they promised we will find you there. And so we set off toward a paradise we imagined warm and hungerless, dreams feeding us when our bread was gone, our hope sharper than days of thirst. We arrived at the end of a nightmare, only to begin another. America, fenced, armed, fingers pointing us back to what we'd thought behind us. There's no milk here, no honey, but longing for our own hard beds and familiar terrors. We had crossed so many forests, only to be caught and caged, fed to the oven, tooth, whale, and bone. So I have one poem. Well, actually, before I read that one, poor Hansel, I go back to the original text, and I think it's meaningful that the way that Kathy and I thought about it and interpreted it is not, of course, the way that the Grimm brothers wrote it, but the facts do remain the same. And Hansel gets one poem, at least so far. He's only had one poem in this collection, in which, again, the idea of that male hero that we're usually used to, right, and that she's the one that saves him, and so Hansel has his sonnet here. I know you didn't ask me, but I need to tell you how, swinging like a pendulum inside that cage, how my body became itself a cage, how my mind sprouted bars and I beat about in it without time, how the past fell from me in thick patches, how the future lodged itself in my throat, a gnarl of unmasticated matter poised to hurl itself in either direction. Gretel, Gretel, how she whispered my name into the echo chamber of my ear, locked her eyes to mine, and for a moment, the wild orchestra of fear in me stilled. How she fed me minutes and hope and will. So that bond. Lesson. When your father throws you out of the house you were born in, when your playground forest becomes an empty, endless night, when the only stranger who takes you in wants to feast on your flesh, you learn that your skin is your only home and you turn in and into the safe haven of yourself. When you feel the first spark of an idea so terrible it singes your heart. When you feel it taking shape like a shadow blossoming into a person. When you speak the cunning words in your sweetest little girl voice and wait. When you do not hesitate, despite the softness of her skin, the brittle nubs of her spine, when her startled oh, as you shove her in. When you hold her thin feet and push them into her screams and shut the oven door, you learn that nothing, nothing at all, not even yourself, can be trusted. So again, I've been kind of just taking some interior, I teach a class on persona sometimes, and I just love to, we can tell the story, but we also have this really wonderful opportunity to get into the interior idea, spaces of these characters. So that's been fun to do. Again, what does it mean to actually put another human being into an oven? Gretel is very chatty sometimes, not all the time. And so during the pandemic, Gretel had a couple of things to say. And this is one of those poems, Gretel's Notes on the Pandemic. And again, it's been really cool to have this corridor of language and I don't know, thinking that goes between, so like Gretel's interiority will pop up in one poem, but then it's like clearly also mine through Gretel in another on a contemporary moment. So I think for the pandemic, this was one of those moments. Gretel's Notes on the Pandemic. 1, just like that, you can become the enemy, evidence, symptom, target. 2, this is the world's harshest lesson. Our bodies are fragile fortresses to which we are bound. The breach is always coming until it comes. 3, how fear unmasks us. In it, we learn that we are willing to sacrifice, which are our true gods. 4, some will pray, even as they cast you out. Some will say your nightmare is of your own making. Some will lay their souls at the feet of any power. Some will pay whatever price honor demands. Some will play music from the rooftops, clear notes ringing through the deathly silence. 5, nothing will change, but you will not be the same. Or everything will change and you will remain yourself. Or both true things will live on together, which is to say, this moment, this story is past and present and always possible. Excuse me. I am seeking another Gretel that is hiding from me. EJ, can you tell me what time I should think about stopping? I know we have to adjust for being late, but I also don't know if you have a solid cutoff at the hour.
You have about another 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is Gretel's Note on Normal, coming also out of the pandemic. You want, I know, to go back to normal, that distant sepia sweet place your memory has touched up with erasure and longing, I know. I can tell you how in the hell of the cottage, that kidnapping come quarantine, all I could think of was home. I drew the blanket of the familiar over my days and dreams, wept when the new reality of my life poked me with its bony finger, ordered me to rise and cook, all of it a cage I could not break. When at last I bested the witch and found her treasures, my future gleaming possible in my hands, I chose to run back to what I remembered. I write to you now from that place, which is to say, I would go to that girl, heaving with relief, and remind her that she was no lost sheep, but a lamb sent to the slaughter. I would tell her that the sacrificed are not meant to survive the cut, that return is another word for re-wounding. I would tell her that she has been sharpening the formidable weapon of her mind, that her hands can build as well as burn. Forget normal and back and happily ever after. I would say to her, imagine otherwise. And so in the imagining of otherwise, one of the things I tried to think about was what healing from that kind of trauma, if we cast the story as one that exists in trauma, what that healing could look like. One of them was to not repeat the cycle. And so this is how Gretel gets her groove back. If you're old enough, you know the reference. And it has, as an epigraph, a line from Rumi that I both love and wrestle with. If you can't be fed, be bred. She didn't opt for the beach. Water wasn't her element. And oh, how she yearned to yearn for the solace of another body, but the smell of human sweat triggered her to weeping, and her trust issues ran too deep to be unseated by a tryst. She unlocked instead the vault of her hands, first plunging them through flowers' powdery kiss, drumming them against the sifter, hefting dough's sticky weight. She whipped and rolled, she cut and poured, she put everything into the oven. The neighborhood air filled with the waft of cake, cookies, gingerbread, buns sprinkled with every variety of delight, the sweetness she had baked into being. Of course, they came, the children, with their drooling curiosity and laid bare hunger. Eat, she said, her heart dancing to the music of their busy teeth, their unwary, full-mouthed questions, the closing door as they left her, full and happy and free. Yeah. Gretel as crone. The woods made me wise, and though I returned home, I was never the same. The witch is inside me now with all the sweetness of her knowing. I see now how the whole story lived in her, each strand a live and moving thing, each future and past waiting to be sutured or cut. So I'm from Trinidad, and one of the things that started happening was an expansion. Gretel started to play with characters from Trinidadian folklore and stories. And so I have a couple of those here that I will read that sort of, well, you'll see. So Gretel sort of grabs that history and plays in it a little bit. It's funny, Carnival just got over. So in my head, it's almost like Gretel is playing a mass, and I actually do have one of those poems in here. This is Gretel as Sukunya, and well, it's Sukunya Gretel. So the Sukunya is a Trinidadian folkloric character. She's a woman who basically sheds her skin at night, becomes a ball of flame, and feeds on the life force of people in her village. She can be stopped in one of three ways. You can find the skin while she's out of it and salt it so that when she puts it back on, the salt burns her and she dies. You can scatter rice grains, which she's compelled for some unknowable reason to stop and count. And of course, it's rice. So if you empty a bag of rice, she spend all night counting. Sun will catch her. And once she's out of her skin at sunrise, she will die. Or you can just find her and beat her to death. Violence as solution. And so this is Sukunya Gretel. My fire finds the villagers sleeping soundly, as though night is a safe thing, as though hunger's reach can be arrested by doors and prayers before bed. I ash their certainty, mark them with despair's red ache. I watch them grow insomniac and wise, trusting no one's benevolence, searching familiar faces for telltale signs, wonder who has learned to abandon the graveyard body, who knows how to escape its prison of bones. When they say my name and plot my demise, I laugh. Salt can only kill you if you are already wholly wounded. A handful of rice, glowing like a line of crumbs, would halt you too if you mistook it for your life. The compulsion to count each betrayal, each failed harbor, every hope you paid for with your innocence, irresistible. They wait for morning like a rescue, poor things. But flame to flame, I know sun only bring false freedom. Let them end me with their fists and boots as their hot breaths steal mine. Their lesson in burning begins. So Sukunya Gretel is not the baking Gretel who is healed, right? Sort of really wanting that to be passed on. I want to read you. Oh, come on. New computer, scroll faster. Blue Devil, oh, I can search, that will be faster. So I just kind of started recently throwing all the Gretels into a file, and we'll see, maybe Gretel is a book, maybe. Blue Devil Gretel. So the Blue Devil is a carnival character painted in this luscious, lovely cobalt color. They taunt onlookers, so they have horns and a pitchfork usually. Sometimes they do the fire breathing, they drink kerosene and blow the fire out. And again, given that carnival has its roots in the enslaved, having this festival of freedom, really, of liberation, of speaking back to power, of dressing up or dressing in mud, Blue Devils are that unrepentant, resistant, character in the mass. So this is Blue Devil Gretel. I slick myself the color of tree-studded twilight, punish my tongue with what it needs to ignite. Ash Wednesday, I will sorry and seek absolution, but Juve morning was forged to hold my defiance, the flaming rapture of my exquisite execution. My breath is the Olympic torch of my triumph, the meatless bone of my horns, another Nancy trick to fool you, pay the devil. Watch me spit flambeau and jab, unscathed, uncaged, and fearless. Blood on my hands, better than my brother's flesh and mine thickening in a stew for the witch's teeth. If killing what would kill me make me a monster, so be it. I decided I deserve a life. My captors, the cost. Pay the devil, I am here. Jab, unrepentantly alive. Blue Devil, an unrepentant Gretel. I want to close with Gretel that landed on my collection, Honeyfish. Somehow, again, I sort of really didn't pull these together. I just been writing them. And so when I was thinking about, I think maybe place and Gretel, this came up again. Well, maybe I'll read two because this also has a forest in it. They all have some version of the forest in it. So one I was thinking of, okay, the forest as a place. This is actually a poem I wrote with my class, and we were thinking of connection to the land. Here we go. And again, as I was writing with them, Gretel emerged as a space to think about that, right? How to find in this story, right, where neither of the domesticated spaces were safe spaces, actually, right, that forest space, and also just wandering for that long in search. So this is Creature Gretel, and then I'll close with Gretel of the Caribbean. Creature Gretel, honest forest, home forest, here where no one seeks me forest, no lost or found or foundling forest, forage foliage for food forest, pray forest, pray forests, hiss and howl and hum forests, whisper silent, chirp and roar, roam and run and rest forest, no day, no night, no light, no dream, but forest, marsh forest, stream forest, slip and trip and slide forest, dirt forest, dung forest, skin becomes a furred forest, body barking, feet aflame, breath rank as the wilding forest, no voice, no words, head clogged with memories thick and snarling forests, forest tears, fears forest, succumb and surrender to the dark forest, heart pebbles, pounds and booms, become forest, be forest. Gretel of the Caribbean. She loves the forest, all dark and leaf speak, an ocean of roots with winged fish, peckish and beaked. She is a wild thing there, ribs and hair, a gloaming of a body. And what was mother here but the cool velvet of moss? Father, the applause of pebbles underfoot. No loss, only directionless drift, only here. I've been speaking to you in the tongue you best understand. And what is which here but another name for season, a necessary turning, home, the blue shore, the inescapable sweetness of sky. Thank you from Gretel.
And thank you, Lauren. Those poems are amazing, girl. They are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
The forest poem, I'm listening to it, I was just like, wow, this is really wonderful. This is like, it's not like I hear the drum of it. It's almost like this marching army, it's just continually marching through all these forests. It's like, whoa, it's really good. And it's just really moving. It just keeps you moving and moving and moving and moving. All of these poems are just so wonderful. And I love the use of the persona form that you use to convey the feelings and the fears and everything of Greta, and to kind of give the witch a way to kind of explain herself. You know, she got to kind of explain herself. But when I think about it, I was like, oh, yeah, well, the witch kind of set that up so that to attract children to eat them. You know, it wasn't like they were taking what was rightfully hers. She literally set that trap. It's not the first time she was doing that. You know, so
well, and I do have another poem, one of the early ones where I was rewriting the story, and the witch is not evil. You know, I was kind of pushing back against that too. But I think one of the things that's been fun is to just let this go in all the possible directions. So in that one, the witch is, you know, the stepmother sends them away because the father is abusive, and she sends them to her mother who lives in the woods. So the witch is the mother-in-law, right, who's often vilified as the witch. And she's an herbalist, and she hangs her things out not to attract anybody, but for her own conjuring that she does, which is her root magic, right? And so again, I've had fun kind of just playing with the possibilities in the tale.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I love how you bring the suffering of children to the light through this, through your poems from this fairy tale, because it's almost as if, it's all a survival thing for whatever the reason is. It's like someone is always hungry, someone is always hunting, and someone is always hunted to be eaten. There's
Well,
no
and thinking about the tale, the question for me, or what again, in asking like what is one supposed to learn here?
exactly
Right. And I think it's certainly about vulnerability, but also about strength, right? But especially like the how safety is so precarious, right? And in some ways it's almost like for children, like you can't trust anything, like the world like might seem lollipop, you can't trust, but what a lesson, right? What a lesson. And so again, thinking about that idea of from and that's what's been, I think, wonderful, like imagining this young girl as the lens through which we see the world, right? Again, almost at the bottom totem pole of vulnerability, really. And then to see power and to see the world from that perspective, what might we see that we miss as adults, as people who would have agency and power? And also, what do we miss about the resilience and the strength and the wisdom of children, right? So it's kind of fun.
Okay, really. I mean, when you think about it, the vast majority, if not all of the fairy tales that we say are fairy tales, they were never written to entertain children. Mm-hmm. They were written for adults. So it's kind of like well, where do we actually see children in the scheme of society? Because we do a piss poor job, really, of protecting.
We don't even want to give them lunch, y'all. Like,
and taking care of children. We just do, Yes, we each love our own children respectively. If you have children, and you might have some nieces and nephews that you really love and you're taking care of them, but society as a whole does very little in our society, at least from what I've seen. We really do very little to protect children. I mean, if we bring it forward to today, we have a state out there that voted to really almost strike down their child labor laws. How is that taking care of our children? How, it really is the fairy tales. This particular fairy tale is really an indictment on adults. What are you doing? Because what are you teaching these children? You're teaching these children that you either eat or you be eaten.
Eaten. All right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, you really have touched on some really
very powerful
while they
themes.
were in the past, they're still current. These trends, these things that we do in the name of raising our children. It's kind of, it's just there. And I love Greta, the Blue Devil Greta. I can tell you right now, I love the Blue Devil Greta. I love that. That's the resistance fighter. There, that one is the resistance fighter. And it's like, it's almost like, here's this girl, this child, and she's trying to save herself and her brother, and she commits an act to save them. And you're saying,
well, and there's so many ways I think about that language works. Sorry, I was teaching a Caribbean class a couple semesters ago, and one of the I can't even, get into all of that, but my students were shocked at the conditions of slave ships. I literally had a student said there were no bathrooms on the slave ships. That had never occurred to her, right? As a junior in college, which is mind-blowing, right? And so we had a discussion about how language can cover something, right? The Native Americans died, the African Americans came, and I was like, what is that? Let's unpack that came. Even if we say we're brought, right, which is still better than came, but what does that look like? What does that mean? Let's unpack that. And that's like, so for me, again, it's like, oh, she shoves her in the oven and it's free. I was just like, let's pause on like, what does it mean to put a human being into an oven, lock them in there? They're not just going to evaporate. Like, that dying is right, it's painful and loud, and then you have that forever with you. Like let's stop, freeze frame in that moment and go into what that means for then the person. I was just like, because again, that's pretty, that is a violent save, right? And so yeah, just doing a lot of that, pausing of in the moments. But I think I saw two folks, Abby and Monique, both had things they wanted to jump in with.
Go ahead, Abby. You were off
okay.
mute at the moment.
These poems are brilliant. They really bring home for me. Some of the things I was working with as a teacher myself for many years, from young children all the way up to junior high, who, when I was selecting, literature for the classroom, I remember reading Bruno Bergheim. I don't know if you know his study on fairy tales.
No.
He wrote this many years ago. He was a psychologist, and he really wrote what was all these fairy tales were about, and they were brutal and allegorical and murderous, and so when you choose books for the classroom, I didn't like the type of editions from Disney, so I wasn't going to give the kids that type of look or an approach to these stories. And I didn't like the way the witches were women who were evil as opposed to healers and herbalists who were, actually brutalized themselves, throughout that history, so many of the things that when you were reading, it really shocked me, it resonated so beautifully. And can I clarify something? I know you read from Honeyfish, one of the poems, about the forest and Gretel, but are all those poems you read today published already, or are they ongoing?
So a lot of the Gretel
collection that you
poems are,
wanna
if
put
you
together?
Google, you'll find a bunch of them on different journals online, but they're not published together. That's the only Gretel in there, in that book.
Oh, I would love to see them in a collection. I would love to see them together. They're just terrific.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so right on in terms of what they're saying and expressing. I love also the Caribbean side of it too,
Monique?
Thank you.
Hi, Alleyne. So, I'm so interested in your name because you're a Trini, but you have a Bajan name.
I know, I get that a lot.
It's like, how'd you get that name? But I'll start there. That in the last couple of poems with the Sukiyat, that you seem to slip into more of a Trini with the jab, more of a Trini vocabulary. Even your intonation went that way. And so I'm interested in the combination of these different personas. So there's the Trini Lauren, and there's the here Lauren, and then this melding with this persona. So I was wondering, like, which voice does Greta really speak with? Because you're saying they go in and out, like when you're dealing with the pandemic, like you know, it's interwoven, but I don't get a sense of like a German European Gretel. I don't get that sense. I'm very interested in how you select which aspects of the persona, or whether you select them, or how that works in terms of the voice coming through. So that was one question. Yeah.
I think for me, it's been just really exploring, because it really began retelling the tale, and so I think it lived in the space of the tale. But as this kind of kept happening, Gretel kept having things to say. So I think by the end, Gretel becomes less of maybe a character and more of a lens, if that makes sense, right? And so that it allows, well, I shouldn't even say allows, right? Like when I was writing, like I don't know how to write a jab or a sukuya. I have a laja bless Gretel without Gretel sounding like this.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think, but I think, doesn't story code switch all the time? Isn't that one of the features of narrative, right? Where and when the story presents, it resonates differently. And so in some ways, the narrative code switches, the voice code switches, but that's what story to me already does. I also love talking about things because I don't know that I have ever articulated that to myself. So thank you for the question. But there and also, I guess the thing that I was really thinking about was that these stories reside in me, right? As a person who was a vociferous reader of all things, including German fairy tales, but also, right, a consumer of the local folklore. And so how are those, if the self or the internal landscape is the space where those things reside, how are they having encounters, right? How are they blending and becoming hybrid? And then what does that look like as they come out? So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully.
Yes, no. I mean, certainly gives it's food for thought. The other thing, which is kind of following up from what Abby was saying, there's a poem that you read about the border. And right now I'm teaching autoethnography with students who are largely immigrant, and I'm trying to find ways for them to express what that feeling is about. And it seemed to me that you hit a number of notes in the coming to the United States, and then the border and the reality versus the mythology. So I just wanted to know, in that poem in particular, if there's any way I can get a hold of it, because I'm like, that seemed to me to hit a number of notes that were, because I think like even with like there's a naming of things, which, as you say, covers over a multitude of sins, right?
Right. What does detain actually mean?
Like, what does that look like? And I think, you know, like this whole business of what we do as poets, I think we need to do more of that unpacking. It's like, yeah, that doesn't look like that in reality. The same way as putting somebody in the oven, that doesn't look like that. So anyway, that was my question, is like the border
That
poem.
is
I don't
actually
even
one
know.
of the ones that isn't published yet. But if you send me an email, I'm happy to send it to you if you want.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try to get
Actually, you can send it to me, Lauren.
Okay.
On my email.
All right.
Monique is on our board, so
Okay.
I'll send it right over to her.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually recently, you know, all of this stuff would pass, and I'm not a quick writer, and I guess part of my not hesitant. So I'm glad to hear the feedback that the poems together. I just feel like, oh, is this going to be like a one-trick pony of a book? You know, like, oh, here's Gretel again, you know, or does it feel coherent? So I'm sort of just playing around with that now that I'm trying to look at them all together. But I wrote the first poem I finally wrote on this situation in Palestine was from Gretel's point of view, right? Gretel, Palestine, and so. Again, I don't know, and I actually was talking with Joanne Gavin, my the founder of Fuso, and my friend, because I was like, you know, and again with all of these, I'm thinking too, because one of the things I think that's important to think about with persona is ethics, right? Sort of the ethics of persona, like what does it mean to inhabit another space, and of course for you know, not mythical, what is the word, story creature, you know, character, that feels like a low stakes thing. But then to also have that character start to engage in, like, I'm like, oh, does it do something to speak about Palestine to have Gretel be the one, right, talking about it? Like, so again, I'm really interested in thinking again about, I feel like the ethics of persona and its limits, is something also that I'm thinking about as I'm working with these poems, and what that means and how that might hit,
Yes.
a way that could be, I think the poem is strong. I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
I don't know about the ethics of persona. I think as long as you don't make the character a victim.
Mm.
In all of the poems that you read, Greta she's an active participant in her life. She's not just sitting back waiting for something to happen to her. And so she's actively participating in her life, and she's actively making statements about what it is she sees, what she's experiencing. Yeah. And yeah, she does come in different time periods and different places, but she's still an active participant in her life, in whatever time
life she
period
finds
she is
herself
in. Right. And she doesn't come across as being a victim, even in the poems where she's not actively like Blue Devil Greta. There is still some form of resistance going on. Like, I have this one chance to push this witch into the oven and lock the door and get out of here. And I'm taking it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of
yeah.
So, I'm not sure that it's life. So, I mean, in life, good or bad is not always ethical. It's not always ethical. So and if you're a living human being, you just face it, people, you are not always ethical.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? Like, again, in terms of the world of the poem, I feel like the basically, as the poem feels solid in that the observation and that part, but then so it's again like the world of the poem, like, I think it's one thing, but then I'm like, now there's me being like, okay, how does this poem in the world refract, what I'm saying, in all of these. But I think, and I and there's all kinds of drama around persona that's happened before, right? The dude who pretended to be Asian American, and right, I have the guy who wrote the kind of really terrible poem with bad African American vernacular, pretending, writing from the point of view of an unhoused person. There's intention is one thing, but impact is another. So I feel like it's important when working in persona to take those dimensions into consideration and be prepared for whatever people
say about it,
right? Like,
but in this case, those two examples, those were intentional things that were being done. In this sense, Greta is a quote unquote fictional character, although I'm probably sure who when they wrote the original fairy tale, there was a person. And this fictional person, this fictional character is opining on all things in all times, because they exist in all times.
As story does, right?
Exactly. As story does.
The online, the foreverness of story.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say something? Jackie, you still there?
No, she had to leave.
She might have left. Okay. Oh wait, no, she's still here.
Oh, she's still there.
Yeah, those are really wonderful poems, Lauren. I feel privileged to hear them. We don't get to hear you enough, so
Well, thank you.
great opportunity. I think I had just started reading E.B. Zoe's Skin. I think it's called Skin, and it's all and the lead characters are a mother-daughter who are super young.
Oh,
And they move from their island, and they come to New York. They live in Brooklyn, and they do their various flights during the new moon. I'm only like 50 pages in, so
what's the author?
E.B. Zoe, she's a Haitian author. I'll
Okay.
send it, I'll send it to EJ, and she can send it to you. It
Okay.
just she's a young adult writer. But I like that you know broke down what they mean and how to stop them. I think okay, I see yourself.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
figured I'd put my email in there for folks who need to
I,
reach me.
I think in African American culture we just call them haints, you
Thanks.
know.
Mhm.
But I appreciated hearing that work um and the fact that you're starting to spin off from the Hansel and Gretel and go into into a folkloric territory that's all your own. So I hope you continue to pursue that because you know
Mhm.
our various diaspora communities are loaded with rich you know deities and characters of
Mhm.
various sorts. So I just want to encourage you to continue and you can be a one trick pony. You'll do just
Y'all wasn't sick of Gretel after 30 minutes. Okay.
Not at all. Not at all.
No,
you'll
not at all. And Jackie's right. You do need to pursue putting them together, putting all of that together, and really sitting down
Yeah.
and reading it through, and because there's really something there. You know, there really is something there. That's not. It's a voice that's not. It's not currently out in poetry world, and it needs to be out there. So you know,
Thanks.
you need to keep working on that.
Sunday inspiration.
Wow. I want to thank you, Lauren, for reading for us today. We really, I mean, really enjoyed the work. And I want to let everyone know that I want to thank everyone that came out today, and I want to thank our sponsors. We are currently funded by the Brooklyn Arts Council, Poets and Writers, the Park Slope Civic Council, the 440 Gallery, the Garner Glazier Foundation, our individual donors, and our audience. And we want to thank all of you for making this event possible. And please join us next month. Actually, next month we are going live, and we will be at the Soapbox Gallery in Brooklyn, New York, 636 Dean Street. And I will be featuring with some of my wonderful musician friends. And we're going to have an afternoon of what I call jazz poetry. And I'll be reading original work, and I will be, the musicians will be accompanying me, and we're going to have a collaboration going on stage. And the musicians will be J.D. Perrin, Michael T.A. Thompson, Christopher Dean Sullivan, who plays bass. And we will have the wonderful percussionist, Mr. Michael Wimberly, joining us.
Oh,
So
great.
it should be a really wonderful afternoon. And I hope that people can come out and join us live at 636 Dean Street, the Soapbox Gallery. And if you can't join us live, we do have a live stream. So just go to onebreathrising.org and go to the events page and reserve your tickets or reserve your spot on the live stream. And in May, we're going to have the wonderful poet Nadia Alexis will be joining us. She has a new book out, and I'm just dying to hear this new work from her. She's been on the poetry scene for a while here in New York, and she no longer lives here, but she finally has her book out, and we're going to support her in May. So please come out and join us in May. And in June, Monique, would you like to say what's happening in June?
Oh, Diaspora, featuring Ahmed Abdullah, will be performing, and we'll be celebrating 10 years of One
10
Breath
years of,
Rising.
yep, 10 years of One Breath Rising.
Yeah. So, yep.
So,
So that's what's happening in June. And that will also be an in-person live music and poetry event.
right. So everyone who can, please come out and join us. And I want to again thank everyone for spending your afternoon with us. I know the weather outside is really nice. We're getting warmer. So thank you very much. And we really hope that you will be joining us for the next 3 months as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, EJ, for
Thank you.
hosting.
Thank
All
you.
again.
Bye, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Right.
You
Bye.
too. Be well, everybody.
All right. Bye.